Hello, I'm Pastor Otis Corbett. Thanks for joining me here as we explore God's Word together. Today we will continue in a series of sermons from Hebrews that I've entitled The Greatest of All Time. And specifically, I want to share a word about the greatest object of devotion from Hebrews chapter 11. A very common saying is to keep the faith. Now that sounds like a good and encouraging statement, but frankly, it's an incomplete thought. It fails to state in what or whom that you are expected to place your faith. Imagine yourself as a passenger on the Titanic during its maiden voyage. You have placed your faith in the designer of the ship, that it would be designed with safety in mind. You've placed your faith in the builder of the ship, that it would have been built with safety in mind. You've placed your faith in the regulatory bodies governing the ship, that with safety in mind, they would require sufficient lifeboats be provided to all passengers. You've placed your faith in the crew of the ship, that it would be sailed with safety in mind. And you've placed your faith in the officers of the ship, that it would be led with safety in mind. Now, if someone said to you, keep the faith at 11:30 a.m. on April 14th, 1912, you'd have no problem doing so. But just 10 minutes later, however, after the ship had hit the iceberg, you would not know who to trust. The power of one's faith is not provided by how fierce or weak it might be. No, the power of our faith is found in its object. And the writer of Hebrews reminds us that Jesus is the greatest object of devotion. Let's begin by reading Hebrews 11, beginning in verse 1. Now, faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. For our ancestors won God's approval by it. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by God's command, so that what is seen has been made from the things that are not visible. By faith, Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was approved as a righteous man because God approved his gifts, and even though he is dead, he speaks through his faith. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not experience death, and he was not to be found because God took him away. For prior to his removal, he was approved since he had pleased God. Now, without faith, it is impossible to please God, for the one who draws near to him must believe that he exists and rewards those who seek him. The first thing we have to see here is that faith is essential. What we must understand right from the beginning is that many things in the Christian life are necessary, but they're not sufficient to please God. We must read our Bibles. We must be kind to one another. We must share the good news. We must support the ministry of the church with our time, our talents, and our tithes. All those things are good, but as Paul reminds us in 1 Corinthians 13, we can still do all those things and be in the ears of God like a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Hebrews 11:6 tells us, now without faith it is impossible to please God, for the one who draws near to him must believe that he exists and rewards those who seek him. The one essential factor that pleases God is faith. It is trust in him and no one else. It's not having a plan B or having a plan C or even a plan D. Now the Gospels give us some great examples of faith. In Luke 7, the centurion, whose servant was ill, trusted that Jesus could heal him at a distance. This is certainly evidence of something not yet seen. Jesus then proclaimed, I tell you, I have not found so great a faith even in Israel. Well, you might say to me, well, that's great, Brother Otis, but I've been hurt so many times, I just cannot trust anyone. I understand that. The good news for someone in such a position is that if we turn to Jesus, he will help us even with our limited faith. For example, Mark 9, beginning of verse 22, a man with a demon-possessed son is pleading for Jesus to help them, saying, "But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Then Jesus said to him, "If you can, everything is possible to the one who believes." Immediately the father of the boy cried out, "I do believe. Help my unbelief." Then Jesus healed his son. The man's faith was not perfect. It didn't need to be perfect. Jesus was the one who was perfect. So again, the key issue is not how strong our faith is. The key is how strong the object of our faith is. Let me say that again. So the key issue is not how strong our faith is. The key issue is how strong the object of our faith is. Any trust we invest in Jesus will never leave us disappointed. The lesson of the parable of the talents is that the more we invest our trust in Jesus, the more we will be blessed and the more He will be glorified. Now, let's read Hebrews 11, 7 through 12. By faith, Noah, after he was warned about what he had not yet seen and motivated by godly fear, built an ark to deliver his family. By faith, he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and went out to a place he was going to receive as an inheritance. He went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he stayed as a foreigner in the land of promise, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, co-heirs of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, even Sarah herself, when she was unable to have children, received power to conceive offspring, even though she was past age, since she considered that one who promised was faithful. Therefore, from one man, in fact, from one as good as dead, came offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven and as innumerable as the grains of sand by the seashore. Let's also continue with Hebrews 11, beginning in verse 19. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. He received the promises and was offering his unique son, the one it has been said about, "Your seed will be traced through Isaac." He considered God to be able even to raise someone from the dead, and as an illustration, he received him back. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and he worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, as he was nearing the end of his life, mentioned the exodus of the Israelites and gave instructions concerning his bones. By faith, after Moses was born, he was hidden by his parents for 3 months because they saw the child was beautiful and they didn't fear the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and chose to suffer with the people of God rather than to enjoy the short-lived pleasure of sin. For he considered the reproach because of the Messiah to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, since his attention was on the reward. By faith he left Egypt behind, not being afraid of the king's anger, for Moses persevered as one who sees him who is invisible. By faith he instituted the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch the Israelites. By faith they crossed the Red Sea as though they were on dry land. When the Egyptians attempted to do this, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after being encircled by the Israelites for 7 days. By faith Rahab the prostitute received the spies in peace and didn't perish with those who disobeyed. The next thing we see is faith is experiential. Now, we may have the best intentions at heart, but unless our faith is put into practice, can we actually say it is faith? This is like the many laws in our nation that are never enforced. A law might exist, but unless someone enforces it, it has no practical effect. For example, in Alabama, it is illegal to play dominoes on Sunday. In Gainesville, Georgia, it is illegal to eat fried chicken except with your hands. In Quitman County, Georgia, it is illegal for chickens to cross the road. I don't know what Georgia has against chickens, but anyway. In Little Rock, Arkansas, it's illegal for dogs to bark after 6 p.m. Sure, right. In Maine, it is illegal to keep Christmas decorations up after January the 14th. In Minnesota, it's illegal to cross state lines with a duck atop your head. And in North Carolina, it's illegal to sing off key. Well, there are a lot of a lot of church choirs that need to be arrested in North Carolina, probably. Anyway, in Utah, the drinking of milk is mandatory by law. Now, no one's enforcing these types of silly laws, so effectively, they're really not laws. In essence, these acts are only illegal in theory, but not in practice, because nobody ever gets arrested for that. In the same way, if we say we have faith but don't have the opportunity to exercise it, is it really faith? Only in theory. It just so happens, however, that life provides us many opportunities to exercise our faith. The writer of Hebrews listed many challenges faced by God's people throughout the centuries, and the variety beggars belief. That list includes everything from simply believing Christ created the universe out of nothing, to making sacrifices and giving offerings to God, to having babies at an advanced age, to follow God's leading into a new land, and everything in between. Again, remember, it's not the faith of any of these people in itself that made the difference in their lives. It was the one in whom they placed their faith that made all the difference. When God's people step out on faith in Him, He works in their lives. Now, these steps may be small in the beginning, the way that David began by hitting targets and small game with his sling and smooth stones. Later, however, after God had proved to David the worth of that simple weapon, he killed a lion, then he killed a bear, and then he killed Goliath. He had faith in his sling because he had experience with his sling. What was theoretical in the beginning for David became reality, and the same is true for us. In the Bible, many people came to Jesus seeking proofs of who He was. The best way for us to do that is have faith in Him in our daily lives. As we place our faith in Him, we see His work and we experience His blessings. Now let's continue with Hebrews 11, beginning in verse 32. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God planned something better for us, that only together with us would they be made perfect. Now, the other thing we see here is that faith is personal. We read scriptures that showed 16 individual names listed in chapter 11. These included men and women, Sarah and Rahab, and the young and the old, and those who were asked to do great things, as well as those who were asked to do smaller things. Those who were asked to start new things are there, and those who sustained existing things are there also. Some listed were fathers and mothers who demonstrated their faith for their children, but had to allow their children to exercise their own faith. Half of the names are listed in the genealogy of Jesus himself. So why is it that these individuals are named? Well, first, it reminds me that individual people are important to God. God chose Enoch as an individual to rapture in heaven. He chose Abraham as an individual to create for him a missionary people to share his love with the world. He chose Moses as an individual to redeem his people from captivity. Later on, Jesus would choose Andrew and Peter and James and John as individuals to create his church and to take his gospel to the whole world. There's a saying that goes, everybody's job is nobody's job. Well, faith is exercised individually before it is exercised corporately. It's also important that all these individuals are named because it reminds us that all their challenges were individual challenges. None of them were the same. Again, some were big challenges and some were smaller. Some were involved great nations, and some involved family dynamics. Some involved fighting battles, and some involved giving birth to children. Now, we might think that their faith was the same, but that would not be true either. Some had great faith from the start, but others, faith had to build over time. And in some, their faith may have faded at the end. So no, the real common denominator of these individuals was not their situations nor their individual faiths, but the one individual in whom all their faith rested, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph. He was their God, and it is He who they put their faith in. And He's the God of all the rest of the people, and He is our God today. And we put our faith in Him the same way they did. One more thing we have to note here before we move on is that not every faithful individual is mentioned here. The writer apologized for this because space and time did not allow him to mention everyone. That's perfectly fine. John in his gospel said that all the books in all the world could not contain all the acts of Christ. Why would we think then that the names of all his followers can be contained in a single book? Well, actually they are. It's just not a human book. It's the Lamb's book of life. Revelation 3:5 says that Jesus will never erase any names from that book, and He will acknowledge every individual in that book to God at the end of time. Finally, let's read Hebrews 11:13 through 16. These all died in faith without having received the promise, but they saw them from a distance, greeted them, and confessed that they were foreigners and temporary residents on the earth. Now, those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they were thinking about where they came from, they would have had an opportunity to return, but now they desire a better place, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them. Faith is potential. Amongst all these other things, faith is essential, faith is experiential, faith is individual, but faith is also potential. As a liberal arts major in school several times over, I don't understand much about physics. One thing I do know, however, is that every object has energy, either kinetic energy or potential energy. When an object is in motion, it has kinetic energy, like throwing a baseball or firing a rocket. And we can see that energy being expended, and we can see the effects that it has on its surroundings. What we often forget is that sitting objects have energy also. This is potential energy. Some force exerted effort placing a boulder on the side of a hill or a piano in the living room of a 10th-story apartment. That energy is there even if it isn't seen. When conditions are right, however, like a landslide freeing that boulder or the strap of a crane breaking under the weight of a piano, then the potential energy is released and the boulder or the piano will come crashing down. God exerts kinetic energy in the lives of every believer as He leads us, and as He corrects us, and as He comforts us. We see Him acting around us and in us and through us. Our God is a God of action, and we see that through the entire Bible, as we also see in our daily lives. But there is more to God than what we can see, however. Our God is also a God of potential energy as well. Now, if all we ever had to look forward to is what we have right now, God would be good. But the fact is, what we have right now is not all that God has in store for us. Like the Old Testament saints, we are temporary residents in this place. We're all just passing through. And someday we will enjoy all, and I mean all, of what God has in store for us. Again, in 1 Corinthians 13, Paul said that we are currently seeing through a glass darkly, but then we will see Him face to face. So often we cannot see the forest for the trees, and we certainly cannot understand the entirety of the wonders God has prepared for us. But we can invest our trust and faith in Him because, unlike people, God always achieves His potential. In conclusion, as we close, one of the greatest promises in all the Bible is concealed here in Hebrews 11, specifically in verse 16. But they now desire a better place, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them. We know from the book of Job that God brags on His people, and I think that's the most amazing thing ever. The God of the universe brags on His people. It's hard to imagine that, but Hebrews 11 gives us the key to that reality. We place whatever faith we have in God today, and He will make great things of it. We will be blessed, God will be glorified, and He gets a chance to brag to Satan about all of it. Wow, wow, what a wonderful God we serve. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be back soon with another word from the Scriptures we can share together. Every blessing. I'm Dr. Otis Corbett.